All right, let's talk about Starship. Today, we are going to break down one of the most incredible engineering stories of our time. We're not just talking about the rockets, but one tiny, crucial, and way more complicated than you think detail, the welding.
So, let's just get right to it. How in the world did Starship go from looking like, well, a water tower built in a field to the genuinely impressive vehicle we see on the launch pad today? It happened in just a few years, which is mind-boggling. And will it ever actually look as perfect as it does in the renders?
You know, this entire saga really begins with one foundational decision, a choice that, at the time, made a lot of people in the aerospace world scratch their heads. I'm talking about what Starship is actually made of.
Okay, so the original plan, the sensible plan, was carbon fiber. I mean, it's what modern planes and rockets are made of. It's super strong and light, but it has a huge weakness. It just can't take the heat. Stainless steel, on the other hand, is an absolute beast when it comes to high temperatures, which is kind of important when you're re-entering the atmosphere at Mach 25. That means you need a much simpler, thinner heat shield.
But honestly, this is the number that changes the whole game. Look at that difference. $150 a kilo versus just $3. When your whole philosophy is about building, testing, blowing things up, and building again, that cost difference is everything. It makes the entire rapid prototyping model financially possible.
And it wasn't even just about the money. Making a carbon fiber Starship would have been a logistical nightmare. To cure a 9-meter-wide rocket section, you'd need a pressure oven bigger than any on planet Earth. You'd literally have to invent and build the world's biggest oven first. With stainless steel, you can pretty much just start building.
So steel it is, a brilliant, if unconventional choice. But now you have a new problem. How do you stick all these giant steel rings together? Especially when you're starting out in what is basically a tent in a field in South Texas.
And this is one of my favorite details in the whole story. The very first crew hired to build this interplanetary spaceship was from a water tower company. They knew how to work with steel, for sure, but a rocket? That is a whole different ballgame.
Now, to really get what they were up against, we gotta talk about welding. It's the process of literally melting two pieces of metal together so they become one. It sounds simple, but doing it right, so that the seam is as strong as the metal around it, is an incredible science. And for a vehicle that has to hold together under unimaginable stress, getting it right is everything.
So they started with a common workhorse technique called flux core welding. The key here is that the welding wire itself releases a protective gas as it burns. This gas is supposed to create a little bubble around the molten steel to shield it from oxygen in the air, which would cause it to rust and weaken. But here was the massive, glaring problem. Their factory was a tent. And a lot of the welding was happening right out in the open. So that all-important protective gas shield, poof, it was just blowing away in the Texas wind. The result was welds that were corroded, full of cracks, and just plain messy.
And listen, those bad welds weren't just ugly, they were a ticking time bomb. This quickly became a critical safety issue, and it was the thing that forced a total revolution in how they built Starship.
Their first solution was pretty brute force. Just grind the welds down until they're smooth. Now, this wasn't just for looks. It was a desperate attempt to get rid of microscopic cracks and sharp spots. See, under pressure, any one of those tiny imperfections can become the single point where the whole structure rips itself apart.
In a perfect world, a weld is just as strong as the metal it's joining. It should be totally seamless, strength-wise. The first big pressurization test was about to prove that for the early Starship, this was absolutely not the case.
And then this happened. The Mark I prototype literally blew its top. During a pressure test, one of those horizontal welds just gave up, and the entire top dome launched hundreds of feet into the air. It was a spectacular failure, but it was also the single most important moment in the program, the wake-up call that changed everything.
So, your prototype just exploded. What do? Well, if you're SpaceX, you don't slow down. This failure kicked off an absolutely blistering series of upgrades that completely transformed the rocket from the inside out.
They didn't just find one solution. They attacked the problem from every angle. First, better steel, a different alloy that's less likely to corrode during the heat of welding. Then, a much more precise welding technique called TIP/TIG, which gives you cleaner, deeper welds. Then came the robots, for perfect, repeatable precision every single time. And they even added more internal supports to make the whole structure stronger.
And, of course, they didn't stop there. The next big leap is probably laser welding. Think of it like a surgical stripe with heat. It's so focused and so powerful, you can weld entire rings together in one clean, super fast pass. It's a huge upgrade in both speed and quality.
But this might be the coolest part of the whole process. It's called planishing. See, welding actually softens the steel right at the seam. So they bring in this giant machine that basically hammers the weld, compressing the steel, which restores its original hardness. And hey, as a nice side effect, it also makes the weld way, way smoother.
So, this all brings us back to that first question. After all of these incredible upgrades, after mastering the steel and perfecting the process, will Starship ever have that perfectly smooth, mirror-like finish we see in all of the concept art? Well, the answer, funnily enough, has almost nothing to do with rockets and everything to do with a very famous piece of art sitting in a park in Chicago. You've definitely seen pictures of this. It's Cloud Gate, but everyone just calls it the bean. What you might not know is that it's also made from sheets of stainless steel that were welded together. And getting that flawless, mirror-like finish was an absolutely massive job. And when you put the numbers side by side, it's not even a contest. It took a crew of 24 people 8 straight months to polish the bean. To get that same finish on a single Starship would take thousands of people and years of work. It's just functionally impossible when your real goal is to build hundreds of these things.
And that really leaves us with the core idea here. The journey of Starship, from that lumpy water tower to what it is today, shows a very clear choice was made. They chose relentless, fast-paced, iterative progress over getting a perfect cosmetic finish. And you know what? That philosophy might just be what it takes to finally get us to Mars.